This is the Grand Tapestry podcast, brought to you by My Family Channel. Each one of our elders' stories is a unique thread in the grand tapestry of American history. In this podcast, we will explore them one by one, to honor them, and to gain perspective through their experience.
Hello and welcome to the Grand Tapestry podcast. I am Todd Smith, and this is episode 7. We are here with Miss Betty Sturgeon at Magnolia Springs, East Louisville in Louisville, Kentucky. And Betty, you were just telling us about how much you love the activities that Amy Webb puts on for you.
I do. I like the Pictionary. I like trivia. And most everything that we do, I like to be a part of it. And I like to play against the men. And there are some men down there, they say that they play against me, just me instead of the other women.
Betty against all the men. Well, that's a good review for Amy there. Well, Miss Sturgeon, you were one of the very first people to try My Family Channel a couple years ago when it was just an idea. And I think we had a group of 7 residents who were the brave pioneers, and we have another one coming up earlier today. So thank you for that. So we're glad to have you on participate in our interview. So today we're just going to talk about your life, and the reason we do this is because we want to capture all of the great wisdom from throughout your life and pass it on to future generations so that they can learn from your experience. Okay? So are you going to share some wisdom with us?
Well, I guess I will. I get started, I don't know when to quit.
You have so much wisdom that you... Okay, well, let's just start at the beginning and tell us about when you were born and where you were born.
I was born November the 27th, 1936, in Hickman, Kentucky. That's in western Kentucky.
Hickman, Kentucky. I don't know if I've heard of that.
You know where Kentucky has that little part on the left, the little part of Kentucky.
Oh, okay.
And the Mississippi River. Well, it's a small town there.
Okay. How small?
Oh, man. Now I would say it's really lost so many. I would say about maybe 1,500 or 1,600, but back then it was small too because it was a farm community around, and they raised soybeans and cotton.
1,500, that's pretty small.
It is, it's small.
That's now.
I know, that is.
Probably less even then. So you probably didn't have a Starbucks there, did you?
No, no. And we walked, when my dad was in service, we moved from the farm into Hickman, and we walked everywhere. And you didn't have to worry about anybody bothering you. And everybody knew you. And, of course, everybody knew where you were and what you were doing.
Even without cell phones.
Right.
It's strange that parents seem to worry more about their kids now, even when the kids have cell phones. You know? I mean, even when I was a kid, we didn't have cell phones, and our parents had no idea where we were. But I just find that ironic. But
well, my mother used to, she would tell us during the war to stay in the yard, but yet at night she'd holler for me and my brother, and we'd tell her where we were by answering, and she'd say, "It's time to come in," and we'd go in. And most people around there watched out for us.
That's nice.
We had a neighbor next door would always knew where we were.
Well, that's nice.
I was the oldest, and I would look out for my brother. Of course, he didn't like it. He'd say, "You're not my mother."
How much older were you than
3
him?
years older.
3 years older. You said you walked everywhere?
Yes.
Like to school and
To school, to church, went to the grocery store with my mother and help her with the groceries, what we needed. And of course, back then, you couldn't get sugar during the war. I remember that. You couldn't get sugar. And we didn't use that much sugar. And my mother would give it to neighbors that needed sugar because she maybe would drink a cup of coffee once a month. And that was her feel. I remember we had a 5-gallon bucket of sugar in our house.
That's just amazing to me. It makes us seem so, to hear about how it was in your, coffee once a month, first of all, that's a real hardship, I'm joking, obviously, but because I have coffee 2 or 3 times a day. How far did you have to walk to school or to church or?
Well, let's see, how far was it? I would say that it was a mile, around a mile. We walked everywhere. I loved walking, and I still like to walk. Everybody tells me with my stroller that I'm in a race, but I walk fast.
Well, I bet it's because you did all that walking when you were a kid.
I did. I can remember when I was little that my dad would be carrying my brother and I'd be walking beside him. And I may be about 4 or 5 years old. And I can remember that, walking into town. And what they would go to town, they would go to movies. Back then they had what they called a serial, where each week you got a new thing. Well, my dad didn't like to miss that. He always wanted to watch that.
So he had to walk into town to see the serial. Mm-hmm. Wow. In this digital age when you can pull up anything, anytime, right, on the computer or the TV, I just try to think of the perspective of not only can you not see what you want when you want, but you have to walk a mile to get to it. That's very interesting to me. I don't know why. Let's talk about when you were a little bit later, when you were a teenager. Were you still in Hickman, or did you all move?
Well, I was a teenager in Lansing, Michigan for a year. I went to school up there, high school. And, of course, by me being from the South, they wanted me to talk all the time. And I had a literature teacher that would give us book assignments. And when I would read a book, I'd get my assignment done because I'd get it over with. Well, he'd have me to get up in front and read it and tell about it. And they would ask, I would like To Kill a Mockingbird. Mm-hmm. We had to read that. And they said, is there really towns that has wood sidewalks? I said, yes. I said, in fact, I went to a town. My dad took us to show us different things. And I said, this town had wood sidewalks. And they said, do you think there was a man that you know of that could have killed that dog that far away? And I said, yes, my dad could have. And my dad would always tell me I would go hunting with him because he when he'd sit down at a tree, he'd go to sleep. And one time we were squirrel hunting and he got tired and he sat down and went to sleep. And I had the rifle and I kept noticing a fox coming up towards us. And I make racket to make it go. And, if the fox will take off. And I thought, well, there's something wrong with that fox. So my dad was sound asleep. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? I can't let that fox get any closer. So I got the rifle and I killed it. And we took it to the vet. And it had rabies. That's the reason it come up so close.
Oh my gosh! So you saved your dad and you from maybe getting
bit by that animal.
Wow!
My dad would always have me practice He would swing a tire. Now it's hard. Swing a tire and you have to go through the circle.
Jump through it?
No, shoot through it.
Oh, shoot through it.
That's the way he would train me, and he trained me about the safety of a gun, how to get over a fence, always put your gun over the fence, away from you, and then you climb the fence. He taught me all about the safety of firearms.
Now, how old were you when the fox incident took place?
I was about 12 or 13.
That's pretty intense for a 12-year-old to, have a fox coming at you.
I put him down.
He didn't know who he was messing with, did he? You want to tell us about your family, your husband and kids?
Well, I met my husband in a bowling alley. I was divorced, and I liked to bowl, so I bowled just about every night. And I'd win games, and I'd win money, and that's the way I paid for my car gas going to the bowling alleys. And I met
a bowling shark.
And I met him. In fact, the bartender introduced me to him. And he just he smiled a lot. He was a happy person. And the first thing that I asked him was, "Are you a grouch?" And he looked at me really funny. He said, "No, I'm not a grouch."
How could he be a grouch if he smiles all the
I
time?
know, that's the way I figured, but I asked him just in case. Because, back then you meet men, they talk about women, they put on the front. Well, men do the same thing. And when I was dating or anything, I would meet them somewhere. And if I didn't like them, I'd pay half of the ticket, half of the meal, and then I'd get in my car and I'd say, "Don't call me anymore."
No grouches allowed. That sounds like a good plan.
You have to, in order to be safe, you have to, because you don't know. Like there was one guy that I met at a restaurant, and he was telling me he could break my neck real easy.
Well, that's nice.
And I told him, I said, "Well, my dad taught me how to fight, and I fight like a man, not a woman." He looked at me real funny, and I said, "I'm leaving."
Yeah.
You don't. Now, like Melvin works here, Melvin White, and I work for him in the prison system. And when he'd hire somebody, he'd ask me, he said, "Betty, how long you think they're going to last?" And I say they're not going to last very long. The inmates already got them. Like the women, they already got them. They're kind of scared of them. But I wasn't scared of them because I had worked with men all my life in all of my places I'd worked.
Sounds like your dad trained you well. That's not a very romantic line, is it? "I could break your neck, don't you?"
No, I know it.
What was he thinking saying that? That's crazy. Sounds like not a very smart guy.
He wasn't.
Well, let me go back to something you just casually mentioned. You worked in the prison system?
Yes. I worked 14 years at Luther Luckett.
What was that like?
Well, the first day I met with the cooks. I was in the kitchen. I met with the cooks, and I told them, I said, "I know everything, how to operate everything in the kitchen." And I said, "If you work for me, you do not take it up until I taste it. And then I'll tell you when to take it up. And you don't come in and put the product on right away." I said, "We'll wait, make sure the product gets to the dining room hot and to keep hot." And I said, "You guys, you'll try to pull something on me." I said, "It's been pulled on me a long time ago." And I never had a bit of trouble out of them. Huh. In fact, they would tell me, like one time there was a young guy come up. He was mad. Oh, he was ranting and raving. He come in the kitchen, and I just told him, I said, "Hold it." I said, don't act like that. Go out on the walkway, get yourself together, then come back in." Well, when I backed up into one of the inmates. They were standing at my back to make sure that he didn't do anything to me.
Oh, they were protecting you.
They were.
Oh, wow.
And I told him, I said, "Guys, I know how to handle him." And he come back in and he apologized. He said, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to come in acting like that."
Well, I'm learning about a whole new side of Betty Sturgeon. I didn't know any of any of this stuff. You don't mess with Betty.
And then one morning, I had the morning shift, and I had to hand out knives for the prepare the potatoes and things like that for the meal. And I always was on the floor, and I heard them raise their voice. And I went over and I said, all right, guys, give me your knives. And I took the knives and took them in the office. And there's one inmate told me, he said, Miss Betty, do you realize what you did? I said, yes, I knew what I was doing. With a calm voice, I said, give me your knives. And I took them, I put them in the kitchen. And Melvin come in, he said, I understand you had to handle something this morning. I said, what? I said, I'd forgotten about it. He said, the inmates told me.
Betty gave us knives.
Yeah, they got knives when the spud crew had to do the cabbage or the slaw or anything like that.
Well, they must have respected you because they didn't, do anything.
Well, I tell you, my first meeting with them, I told them, I said, I am a lady, and I expect to be treated as such. And I said, you will be treated as men. And I said, there will be no color mentioned in here, no racism, not any of that will be mentioned. And they knew what I do. And Melvin had told me, he said, if they get out of line, you let me know.
Can I have my daughter come talk to you? I want her to hear that speech. That's a good one. Let's fast forward a little bit. Talk about computers, technology, all the crazy things going on in that department. What are your feelings about technology in general?
Computers are good, and also the other part, the phones. That way you can get information right now where you don't have to go to a library or look it up in places. I like that. But I look at people with the phone and they're walking. They don't know what's around them, who's around them, or any of that. And then that is a safety hazard that they have.
It is kind of sad in a way. You walk around a busy city street and everybody's, walking around like that.
They are. Just like the old saying, wake up and smell the roses. Mm-hmm. And you don't know who's out there. And like young women, I've seen the young women do that. And they don't realize who's around them, who's watching them, who's following them, who's seeing who she's talking to and everything. Mm-hmm. And men are as bad too, but there's danger in it. I always would tell my daughter, I said, no matter where you are, if the car breaks down, I'll come and get you. Mm-hmm. And I said, if somebody is following you, you think they're following, pull into the police station. Mm-hmm. And you never know who's out there and what they're doing and everything. I have talked to my grandson about that, and he would go, he went to college, and he said, there's one, she never looks up. And he said, I'll stand there and let her run into me.
Teach her a lesson. So you want to tell us about one of your happiest memories throughout your life? What comes to mind if you think about one of the happiest times of your life?
When I met my husband.
When you met your husband and you asked him if he was a grouch?
He knew then that I was up front with everything. And also I told him I'm a divorcee, but I'm not a gay divorcee. If you're looking for a one-night stand, keep on trucking. He told me later on, he said, I like to fell off the bars too when you said that.
Well, he's probably not used to someone being so direct, and upfront, but it was probably refreshing.
He liked it.
Yeah.
And
let's get this straight, buddy. Number 1, number 2, number 3.
And I had noticed that the women in the bowling alley were trying to set him up with their daughters and everything. And he was a handsome man. And And I would tell him, I said, with all of these blonde and blue eyes, you chose me. He said, I knew I could trust you. I knew that what you said was the law.
That's a nice thing for someone to tell you, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. That might be a good segue into our last question. How would you like to be remembered by future generations?
Well, that I had fun, that I wasn't a grouch. Life is going to hand you things that you think you're not prepared for, but you are. And you think it out. You treat people the way you want to be treated. And not to be holier than thou, all of that, but just be a good friend. And my philosophy is, if you're my friend, you're a friend for life. And I have some friends that I used to, when I was out there and driving, I was always the driver when there was 5 ladies, and I always would drive because I knew how, if there was a wreck, I knew how to get around the wreck and get back where it was. And I'm still friends with them. I call them, if I don't call them once a month, they think there's something wrong with me.
That's great. You still have friends that long. Well, Miss Betty, we have really enjoyed talking to you, and thank you so much for sharing all of your stories and wisdom with us.
Okay.
And I'm sure everyone that listens to this is going to enjoy it too.
All right.
So thank you very much, and have a great day.
You too.
Thank you for listening to the Grand Tapestry Podcast, brought to you by My Family Channel. Please visit us at myfamilychannel.com and be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite listening directory.